Ladies and gentlemen, right now, too many people are trapped in cycles of regret. You say things you don't mean. You lash out in anger. You break promises to yourself. You're running in circles, out of control, not because you're weak, but because you've never learned to truly govern yourself. In this message, we are going to uncover the real reason why so many people feel powerless over their emotions, impulses, and decisions, and how you can break free and finally take back control of your life. There is a war that every man and woman fights, and it doesn't take place on a battlefield marked by smoke and fire. It happens within the chambers of the human heart. It's a war not seen by human eyes, but felt in every temptation, in every decision, in every moment when what we want collides with what we know is right. This war within is the very battleground of self-control. And until you recognize it, until you wake up to the reality that this war is shaping your future, you will live at the mercy of your desires instead of walking in the strength of discipline. This war is not just between good and evil. In the world, it is between your higher calling and your lower craving. It is between your desire for comfort and your hunger for purpose. Between the temporary satisfaction of the flesh and the eternal rewards of the spirit. You feel it when you know you should stay silent, but your anger explodes. You feel it when your alarm goes off and you hit snooze, choosing comfort over commitment. You feel it when you're tempted by the things you swore you'd never go back to, but something inside pulls you like a magnet. Every person fights this internal war, the battle of discipline versus desire. Your desire will always speak first. It is loud. It is urgent. It makes you feel like you must act now. It doesn't wait. It doesn't reason. It just wants. Desire says, eat now, you deserve it. Discipline says, wait, your body is a temple. Desire says, let them have it, show your anger. Discipline says, hold your peace, respond with grace. Desire will always choose the path of least resistance, but discipline walks the narrow road that leads to life. You were not created to be ruled by your urges. You were created with the power to choose, the ability to rise above instinct and live with intention. The very breath in your lungs was placed there by a God who gave you not only life, but also dominion, first over yourself. Yet how many of us give up that dominion? How many of us give our power away every time we say, I couldn't help it? You were never meant to live at the mercy of emotions, cravings, impulses, or bad habits. But you must wake up to the war. If you don't see it as a battle, you will never prepare to fight. Some people live their entire lives being pulled by every emotion that passes through them. They speak without thinking. They react without praying. They consume without conscience. And then they wonder why they feel lost, broken, powerless. It's because they never took hold of the weapon of self-control. They never trained their soul for battle. They thought the enemy was out there, in other people, in circumstances, in bad luck. But the real enemy was the lack of control within. Cannot win the war around you if you are losing the war within you. It doesn't matter how much talent you have, how many opportunities come your way, or how loud your dreams are. If you are ruled by your desires, your destiny will always be out of reach. The momentary pleasures will rob you of long-term peace. The decisions you make in weakness will cost you what could only be built in strength. You might gain attention, but you'll lose your soul. You might gain success, but you'll lose your purpose. We live in a time where desire is not only accepted, it is celebrated. Society tells you to follow your heart, but the heart is deceitful above all things when it is not anchored in truth. Culture tells you, if it feels good, do it. But what feels good in a moment may destroy what took years to build. You are being bombarded every day with voices that try to numb your awareness of this war. The advertisements tell you that you're missing out if you don't indulge. The media tells you that boundaries are oppression. The influencers tell you that discipline is outdated. But the truth still stands like a mountain. The undisciplined life is a broken life. True freedom is not doing whatever you want. True freedom is having the power to say no when your desires scream yes. The man who cannot control himself is a slave, no matter how free he thinks he is. And no one becomes disciplined by accident. You don't drift into self-mastery. You train for it. You suffer for it. You fight for it. Just like a soldier trains for war, you must train your soul for the fight against everything that wants to derail your destiny. The war within will not stop. It will rage every day you wake up with breath in your body. But with every choice to honor discipline over desire, you take ground back. You reclaim territory that once belonged to weakness and hand it over to strength. You silence the voice of I can't help it, and you rise in the authority of I will choose what is right. Your spirit must become the captain of your soul, not your appetite. Because the direction of your life will follow the voice you obey most. Every human being is born with a deep longing to change something, to influence, to build, to leave a mark. We want to be successful, we want to have impact, we want to live with purpose. But the tragedy of our time is that most people want to master the world around them without ever learning how to master the world within. We want to lead others while our own thoughts run wild. We want to build empires while our emotions are falling apart. We want to manage businesses and raise families and preach truth, yet we haven't taken the time to confront the disorder that exists behind our own eyes. You cannot master anything out there until you first master what is going on inside of you. The root of so much pain, failure, regret, and destruction is not that the world is against you, it's that you have not learned how to govern yourself. You can't control what others say, but you can control how you respond. You can't stop every temptation from knocking at your door, but you can decide not to open it. You can't guarantee the world will be fair, but you can choose to be righteous in how you live. That is the real battle. That is the real power. Not in controlling others, but in conquering yourself. We see people who appear to have success, but inside they're crumbling. They smile in public and weep in private. They speak of peace but are tormented by anxiety. They promote discipline but secretly battle addiction. They look strong on the outside but are slaves to their own weakness. Because the image of control means nothing when the substance of it is missing. You can build the tallest building, lead the biggest crowd, and achieve the highest title. But if you cannot lead yourself with discipline, wisdom, and integrity, it will all come crashing down eventually. History is full of men and women who had all the gifts and all the glory but lost everything because they never dealt with the disorder in their own soul. Mastery of the self is not about perfection. It's about submission. It's about aligning your mind, heart, and body with a greater truth, a greater discipline, a greater calling. It's about waking up and making decisions that your future self will thank you for. You cannot master your future if your present self is out of control. You cannot walk into purpose while being dragged by your own impulses. Your ability to control your tongue, to guard your thoughts, to discipline your habits. These are the true signs of leadership. This is the kind of mastery that heaven recognizes. You don't drift into self-control. It takes intentionality. It takes humility. It takes confrontation with the parts of you that are lazy, angry, lustful, fearful, bitter. It means facing the mirror and being honest about the thoughts you entertain and the behaviors you've excused. It means asking the hard questions. Why do I keep doing the same thing I hate? Why do I let others dictate my peace? Why do I react out of pain instead of responding in love? That kind of self-reflection isn't weakness. That's strength. That's where healing begins. That's where the shift starts. To master yourself is to walk in the fruit of discipline. It's to say no when everything in you wants to say yes. It's to stay focused when your flesh wants to drift. It's to hold your tongue when your emotions want to explode. It's to wake up early when sleep tries to seduce you back under the covers. Mastery doesn't mean you never fall. It means when you do, you get back up with greater wisdom, with deeper commitment, with a heart that refuses to settle for mediocrity. Many people think freedom is doing whatever you feel. But true freedom is doing what is right even when you don't feel it. That's what maturity looks like. That's what separates leaders from followers, warriors from wanderers, builders from destroyers. The one who masters himself is the one who can carry the weight of real responsibility. Because leadership without self-mastery becomes dangerous. Power without discipline becomes corruption. Influence without integrity becomes manipulation. When you begin to govern your thoughts, your choices, your time, your emotions, you begin to align yourself with power. Real power. Not the kind that shouts from rooftops, but the kind that stands firm when the storm rages. The kind that endures betrayal, delay, and disappointment without losing its center. That kind of control doesn't come from the world. It comes from above. It comes from a life that is surrendered, shaped, and submitted to a purpose greater than comfort, greater than popularity, greater than personal gain. You will never find lasting peace by changing your environment if your inner world is still in chaos. No relationship will fix what only discipline can build. No opportunity will sustain what only integrity can uphold. The one who rules his own spirit is stronger than the one who takes a city. Because mastering yourself is the highest form of warfare. It's not loud, it's not glamorous, but it is transformational. It is what elevates a person from surviving life to leading life. From reacting to everything to rising above everything. From being controlled to walking in control. In a world that glorifies strength, dominance, and self-reliance, the idea that true power comes from surrender sounds foolish to many. But that is because most people have misunderstood what surrender really means. Surrender is not weakness. It is not giving up. It is not letting life run over you. It is the most courageous act a person can make to lay down their will, their ego, their pride, and submit to a higher authority, a greater purpose, a divine calling that is stronger and wiser than our own understanding. True power is not found in how much control you can force upon others, but in how much control you gain when you surrender yourself to what is holy, what is right, and what is eternal. We are born into a nature that teaches us to fight, to push, to compete, to win. We're taught from the earliest days that the strongest survive, that the loudest are heard, that the proud are praised. And yet, the very moment a person surrenders to truth, their life begins to shift. Something happens when a man or woman stops trying to carry the weight of their own world and places it into the hands of the one who created it. That moment of surrender is not a collapse, it is a breakthrough. It is not a breakdown, it is a rising. It is not the end of power, it is the beginning of real strength. We try so hard to control everything, our image, our outcomes, our relationships, our futures. We spend our energy trying to hold all the pieces together, pretending we have it all figured out, wearing masks of perfection while silently crumbling inside. We think if we can just push a little harder, fight a little longer, hustle a little more, maybe we can finally feel powerful. But real power doesn't come from striving. It comes from abiding. From resting in the knowledge that you are not your own savior. That your strength is not enough. That your wisdom has limits. That your will can be deceived. And that the greatest strength is found when you finally let go. The world teaches us to rely on self, but self is often the problem. Our emotions deceive us. Our desires mislead us. Our pride blinds us. And in trying to be our own God, we often end up enslaved by our own chaos. The more we try to control without surrendering, the more we feel overwhelmed, anxious, defeated. There is a burden that comes with self-rule, a weight that was never meant for human shoulders. You were never meant to carry it all. You were never meant to fix yourself by yourself. Surrender is not a failure of strength. It is the recognition that your strength alone is not enough. True surrender is not passive. It is active trust. It is waking up every day and choosing to place your steps in the hands of the one who orders them. It is refusing to let fear dictate your decisions. It is letting go of the need to have all the answers and trusting in the one who holds tomorrow. That kind of surrender unlocks a power that cannot be shaken. Because once you surrender your outcomes, your fears lose their grip. Once you surrender your past, shame loses its voice. Once you surrender your pride, healing has room to move. There is power in letting go of the fight to be in control and entering the rest of being under divine control. Many people try to be strong on the outside while they are breaking on the inside, but you cannot fake internal strength. You can't pretend your way into peace. You can't perform your way into purpose. It comes only through surrender, through yielding your heart, your mind, your will, your plans to something greater. It is in that place of surrender that you finally hear the voice of clarity over the noise of confusion. It is there that you gain wisdom that the world cannot offer. It is there that your chaos begins to quiet, your fear begins to fade, your strength begins to rise. When you surrender your life, your habits, your thoughts to divine truth, you begin to walk in a power that sustains you even when circumstances don't change. Because power that comes from surrender is not situational, it is internal. It's the power to forgive when you've been hurt. It's the power to resist temptation when everything in you wants to give in. It's the power to stand in the fire and still believe. It's the power to keep going when your body is tired and your mind says quit. That is the power that does not come from flesh. It is born from surrender. It is refined in obedience. It is strengthened through faith. Some of the most powerful moments in a person's life are not when they conquer something outside of them, but when they finally bow their heart in humility. When they let go of bitterness, when they release control, when they stop running and finally say, I can't do this on my own. That is the beginning of power. Because in that moment, heaven begins to move. In that moment, your weakness is met with supernatural strength. In that moment, what you could not do for years on your own is transformed in the hands of the one you finally surrendered to. There are things in life that discipline alone cannot fix. There are battles the mind cannot win. There are wounds that will not heal through effort. These require surrender, not once, but every day. Not as a last resort, but as a daily lifestyle. You don't surrender once and never struggle again. You surrender daily, and that is where your strength is built. That is where your control over self begins to grow. Because once you are anchored in surrender, no storm can move you. Once your foundation is no longer built on your own ability, but on truth and grace, your ability to control your life multiplies. Not because you control more, but because you are no longer controlled by the things that once ruled you. Asterisk. Every single day you are walking, whether you realize it or not. You are walking in one of two ways. Either you are walking in the spirit or you are walking in the flesh. There is no in between. One leads to life, the other leads to destruction. One leads to peace, the other to chaos. One leads to discipline, the other to indulgence. The way you walk determines the path you follow, the strength you build, and the destiny you fulfill. And if you're not intentional, you will find yourself drifting into the desires of the flesh and calling it freedom, when in reality it is slavery dressed in comfort. The flesh will always pull you downward. It is that part of you that is impulsive, impatient, selfish, easily angered, addicted to pleasure, and resistant to truth. The flesh craves comfort more than character. It wants ease more than excellence. It doesn't want to grow. It wants to gratify. It doesn't want to wait. It wants to take. And the more you feed the flesh, the stronger it becomes. It will dominate your thoughts, hijack your emotions, and rob you of the very peace your soul was created for. The flesh is loud, it is demanding, it is deceptive. And if you are not walking in the Spirit, you will obey the voice of the flesh without even realizing it. But the Spirit leads you differently. The Spirit whispers when the flesh screams. The Spirit convicts when the flesh excuses. The Spirit builds when the flesh destroys. And walking in the Spirit is not about being perfect, it is about being led. It's about choosing to pause before reacting, choosing to pray before speaking, choosing to serve instead of taking. It's about making decisions from a place of truth, not a place of temptation. It's not the easy path, but it is the only path that leads to life. Walking in the Spirit begins with awareness. You must wake up every day and ask yourself, who is leading me right now? Who is guiding my choices? Who is influencing my attitude? Am I being led by my emotions or am I being led by truth? Am I walking by impulse or by wisdom? Because you can't live a Spirit-led life on autopilot. The flesh will always take over if the Spirit is not given authority. The moment you stop being intentional is the moment the flesh steps in and tries to take the throne. There are things you will never overcome in your life by willpower alone. Some battles require surrender. Some chains break only when you stop feeding the flesh and start feeding your spirit. When you walk in the Spirit, you begin to recognize the traps before they catch you. You begin to feel convicted where you once felt numb. You begin to crave truth more than comfort. The Spirit gives you the ability to say no to what once ruled you. It empowers you to resist what once seemed irresistible. That is not your strength. It is the strength of something greater living inside you. People think self-control is about trying harder, but the truth is that real self-control comes from walking closer. The closer you walk with the Spirit, the stronger your self-control becomes. Because when you are aligned with truth, you no longer need to be driven by cravings. You don't need validation from people. You don't need to prove yourself. You don't need to satisfy every emotion. The Spirit teaches you to be still when the world tells you to panic. It teaches you to be bold when the world says to back down. It teaches you to love when your pride wants revenge. The flesh will always justify its actions. It will always find a reason to indulge, to lash out, to compromise. It will say, "You deserve this," or "They did this to you," or "It's not that bad." But the Spirit will never lower the standard. The Spirit speaks truth even when it hurts. It calls you to a higher standard. It challenges your excuses. It exposes what's hidden. And when you walk in the Spirit long enough, you begin to desire what is holy. Your appetite changes. What once entertained you begins to grieve you. What once satisfied you now empties you. Because your spirit is awakening, and the more it awakens, the more the flesh loses its grip. Walking in the Spirit is a daily decision. It's not an emotional high. It's not a one-time event. It is a discipline. It is a relationship. It is a posture of humility, and it requires you to starve the flesh. You can't feed your spirit if you're constantly feeding your flesh with distractions, temptations, gossip, bitterness, laziness, pride. You cannot expect clarity from heaven when your mind is filled with the noise of the world. You cannot expect peace when you entertain chaos. You must be willing to separate yourself from what feeds the wrong part of you. The flesh will always try to rise again. Even after seasons of victory, the temptation will return. The thoughts will try to creep back in. The old habits will try to knock on your door. But walking in the Spirit means you now recognize the enemy. You see the pattern before it takes root. You no longer entertain what once enslaved you. Because You know that your freedom is not worth sacrificing for a moment of pleasure. You know that your calling is too great to be distracted by the counterfeit. You know that your peace is too valuable to be traded for temporary satisfaction. The Spirit will lead you to a life of purpose, of discipline, of vision. It will not always feel easy. It will not always make sense. But it will always be right. And the more you walk in the Spirit, the more control you gain over yourself. Not because you are strong in yourself, but because you are no longer led by what is fleeting. You are led by what is eternal. You are no longer a slave to your impulses. You are governed by grace, empowered by truth, sustained by strength that does not come from man. And in that place, self-control is not just a behavior, it becomes your nature. We live in a time where the greatest battles are no longer fought on open fields, but in the unseen places, in the human heart, in the silence of decision, in the space between impulse and action. This is the battleground of self-control. You were not made to be ruled by your emotions, your cravings, or your circumstances. You were created to walk in strength, in truth, in divine order. But that strength does not come by chance. It comes through awareness of the war within, through the daily mastery of your own mind and behavior, through the deep surrender to a power greater than your own, and through a committed walk in the Spirit, not the flesh. You cannot conquer the world until you've learned to conquer yourself. You cannot lead others with clarity if you are led by chaos. And you cannot walk into purpose while still chained to your own impulses. Real freedom, real victory, real transformation begins when you decide that your emotions no longer get to dictate your actions. When you choose discipline over desire, when you submit your will to truth, when you stop letting the noise of the flesh drown out the whisper of the Spirit, that is where you take your life back. That is where change begins. That is where control is reclaimed, not by force, but by faith, not by pride, but by surrender. Not by performing for the world, but by walking daily with purpose, integrity, and divine strength. That is how you get control of yourself, and once you do, there is no limit to what God can do through you.